All right, we are live again with a new hangout, and we are a little bit late today. I'm sorry for that. It's been a busy day. Let's see, we already have a few people in the chat.
Yeah.
Jenny is there. Hi, Jenny. Diane, hello. Caroline is with us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, we had a bit crazy day, or well, I had anyway. I was trying to get new winter shoes, and there was nothing. Very difficult.
Yeah, it's not always easy to choose winter shoes. Yeah, and I've had guitar students all day. And anyway, now we're here, and today's topic is raw versus cooked.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk a little bit about the science, raw versus cooked, but also a little bit about our experience over the last 6 years of eating mostly raw, and of course our whole life eating mostly cooked.
Yeah.
So we have experience on both sides.
It's a hot topic.
Definitely. Of course, as usual, everyone in the chat, we're so happy to have you with us. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions or anything, you just shoot, because we want to interact with you guys. That's kind of the main thing with these hangouts. Mm-hmm. And just for the record, if you're watching the recording of this, which we'll post on YouTube a little bit later, know that you can join the next hangout by going to patreon.com/sweetnaturalliving and join there. Matt is also with us. How's it going? It is going well. Well, actually, we're super tired. I have a headache, and it's a stressful day.
Yeah.
But we're good mentally, and we're ready to do this hangout. So, How are you doing, Matt? And everyone else, how's your day going?
Oh, and by the way, if there's any weird, I can see it. If there's any weird stuff going on with the stream in terms of lagging or bad audio quality and stuff, you can tell us. I'm not sure we can do anything about it at the moment. We might have some struggles, but we try the best we can, and we might improve in.
And you're not
videos.
streaming it. You're not like streaming at the same time or anything like that. Sure.
Yes.
I was just thinking it would be.
No, there's nothing.
Technical stuff always the thing. All right, so it looks and sounds perfect, says Jenny. So that's good. Thanks, Jenny. 11 p.m. in Western Australia. Wow, late nighter.
Yeah, and you can pretty much watch it because you're in Western Australia, right? Because Eastern would be quite a lot later. I
Even
think.
later in Eastern Australia. Yeah.
That's the problem with these hangouts. It's kind of difficult to make it work for everyone.
Yeah, but that's cool though. Having someone with us from Australia, that's not always. Running on 10 bananas for dinner, that's always good. Yeah. 10 bananas seem to do the job. And Jenny Kanelhjärta is with us as well. Hello, Jenny. Good to have our two favorite Jennys with us. All right. Raw versus cooked. Well, maybe we should start by just going through the science, at least what we know about the science. Mm-hmm. Obviously, first of all, every animal in nature eats raw food. 100% raw food. Yeah. I mean, it's the norm. It's the way of things. It's the law. Like you do not cook your foods, and cooking is a destructive process. It breaks down things. Mm-hmm. So ideally speaking, we should be eating raw foods. Obviously, that's why the raw food diet is so great, and that's why we are promoters of the raw food diet, because of many things that we'll talk about now. But basically, that's the norm we see in nature. Now, why do people cook foods though? Well, there are many reasons for why.
But that's not necessarily it's a science of it. That's more the practicalities.
Maybe, yeah. But maybe we should do that first. Maybe we should just mention why people cook food. Why would you cook your food at all if cooking is a destructive process?
I mean, to begin with, many thousands of years ago, it was probably... Well, I mean, it's really easy to cook tubers to make them edible. So that opens up a whole new food group, a calorie source for wonders of the wilds.
Yeah, it was probably, as the environment changed, as we were apes in the jungle eating fruit, probably some greens, maybe some insects. The environment changed, but not only, if you look at it in a real grand scheme of things, not only did the environment change, but we moved as well. That's one of the traits of humans. We are so curious about everything, so we start moving out of our ideal environment, But strictly speaking, that the migration out of Africa didn't really happen until like 100,000 years ago. Although there were a few earlier expeditions, I think, but if we're talking evolutionary speaking, we still remained in that area of the tropical Africa.
And it was, we were going into the steppes and stuff of Africa. So
and the forest was retreating, right? So the environment was changing for whatever reason, and we had to find an alternative food source. We had to survive in a changing environment, and one of the ways we survive is by using tools. So we were able to survive by eating other foods to which we're not biologically adapted, by cooking them.
We survived, but that does not necessarily mean that the foods we were eating were optimal for us in any way. Obviously, stuff as meat as well. It's a lot easier to eat cooked meat than raw meat in many ways. Probably safer as well. Yeah,
parasites and stuff are more easily killed bacteria. And when it comes to roots and tubers, which are actually quite similar to fruit in terms of nutrition, they are obviously a great alternative to fruit, as much today as it was for many millions of years ago. Matt says he likes our insects video, fairly controversial. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. More stuff to come on that topic over the next few months, for sure. It is controversial, but that's cool. Caroline is about to eat breakfast. 10 a.m. in Washington, D.C. California keat mangoes. Nice. They are... Well, I've never had California keat mangoes, but we have had keat mangoes, and they can be really good.
Yeah.
That's a good breakfast. So, okay. Now that we've talked about, like, why would someone cook their food, let's talk about what happens. Why is raw superior to cooked?
Yeah, well, I think there's two factors to consider. The one is that when you cook food, and this is what most people think of, you destroy nutrients, and it really does happen. When the longer you cook it, the higher the temperature, it will destroy certain nutrients. Of course, everyone knows of like vitamin C goes away real quick. But this happens to pretty much everything. It also destroys the fiber. It denatures it, I guess you could call it.
No, denatures the protein.
Yeah, but whatever.
Yeah.
But,
nutrients are destroyed, basically. They're damaged, and there's in some cases they go completely away, like they're completely lost. Some of it is because of heat, the temperature itself. While some of it is just water. If like you're boiling something, you lose some of them, like especially the water-soluble vitamins like B and C. They're just leached into the water, which is why steaming tends to be a better solution for preserving some of those vitamins. But I've recently read that actually pressure cooking seems to be even better because of the short cooking time. You're able to preserve even more nutrients. But
of course, it's not necessarily a lot of science on it. On pressure cooking, so
I don't know. I haven't looked into that.
No, it's probably fine, and might be better.
Yeah, but of course, it does destroy nutrients. Cooking, so raw food will always be better because it is more nutritionally complete.
That's another thing. When you're cooking foods, it's easy to cook foods that are not necessarily nice to eat in its optimal form. Which makes you, let's say grains, for example, grains are pretty much inedible when they're raw. Like wheat, for example, not going around eating raw wheat. But when you're cooking it, you're making it edible. But it still will have those low, it's going to be low in certain nutrients already, and then you're cooking it, and they're even more deprived of certain nutrients.
It's basically it's a twofold problem, because you're starting out with a food to which we're not adapted to, like grains, legumes, roots, tubers. So because we haven't evolved with those food, bear in mind, we've evolved with fruits and humans, fruits and primates. There's a symbiotic relationship there, which means that our nutritional needs are to a certain degree matched by the fruits. We've evolved with those foods. So by being adapted to eating a fruit-based diet, they actually meet our needs very well. But when we suddenly take a food to which we're never adapted to, like grains that we've only eaten for the last 10,000 years or so. Sorry, wait, what are you doing?
I just saw that Caroline can't see us yet.
Really?
So I was just also seeing that Jenny K was asking how to pressure cook stuff with a crock pot or rice cooker. I'm unsure crock pots can be used as pressure cookers.
A pressure cooker is a particular thing. I don't know what a crock pot is, but a pressure cooker is a cooker where pressure builds up inside the pot, right? Well, you know what it is? A crock pot?
Well, from what I know, a crock pot is just a
slow cooker
thing with a lid you put in the oven.
Oh.
Maybe. I think so.
Oh, so you don't know either?
I'm pretty sure. But pressure cooker is you put it on a stove and it builds up pressure and it releases it. Like, it's crazy.
Well, it doesn't release it, all of it, that's the point. It builds up a certain pressure, and then because of the pressure, then it cooks at a higher temperature, which means it cooks faster. And that preserves some of the nutrients because the cooking time is shorter. Now, just to conclude what I was saying, what was I saying actually? You're taking foods, for example, grains that we're only been eating for 10,000 years or so, and then our nutritional needs aren't matched by those foods. And now cooking them, you're making them even more nutritionally sort of strange. So the problem is not just that you're cooking the foods. It's actually almost more so that now you're eating foods to which you're not adapted. So that's the biggest problem, I guess.
Well, that depends, because probably it is the biggest problem. But the third aspect of cooking foods, I think, is the fact that when we're cooking foods, we create toxins depending on the cooking process.
That's true. That's a big one, of course.
Yeah. So we can start at the bottom. From being raw, there are pretty much no toxins created from cooking because we're not cooking it, unless there's some toxins inherently in the raw food, which there might be.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if you think about something like spinach, has oxalic acid. It's not a toxin per se, but it is an anti-nutrient. Certain things in the food. This is another example of things to which we're not biologically adapted to eating, like grains and legumes. They have a lot of anti-nutrients, like lectins and phytates, which inhibit nutrient absorption and cause certain effect in the body. So again, because we're eating foods to which we're not adapted, we're now being exposed to these toxins, we could say.
Just a quick note though, there are, of course, we mustn't forget that cooking can also remove toxins. Because
there
are some foods like
kidney beans.
Kidney beans. Potatoes.
Potatoes, but kidney beans even more so. Like, you will die if you eat raw kidney beans. There is no doubt you will die. You will die a lot if you eat raw kidney beans. But when you cook them, you remove that particular lectin that is killing you, and so that's true. So you were starting to talk from the bottom up. What creates problems with toxins created by cooking?
So there's raw, and then there is boiled and steamed. These will never go above 100 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but you probably know. And at this point, as far as I can tell, and I've been doing a little bit of research on it, there don't seem to be any overt toxins created in the cooking process. I don't see any evidence of actually any toxins or problems with cooking food at this temperature.
Except maybe the fact that proteins are denatured. Which
I'm not sure that happens at 100
Oh, that
degrees.
happens. That certainly happens. That I'm 100% sure.
Okay.
It happens. Proteins are denatured when you're heating them above 40 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius. Protein starts becoming denatured.
Okay.
But some people say, and I've still not been able to find really good evidence for this. Some people say that when proteins are denatured, it basically means that their shape is altered, and then they create enzyme resistant bonds, and we're not able to digest them and stuff. That seems like a bad thing, but then other places I read that denatured proteins are then easier to digest. So on that particular topic, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but generally speaking, very low toxicity of cooking when you're cooking at low temperatures. We'll go about the higher temperatures just in a minute. Matt says, do you think we're not adapted to cooking foods or to the foods we are cooking, or both? Well, certainly both. I mean, we're not adapted to those foods. We haven't evolved with those foods. We evolved with fruits. But even if we took fruits and we cooked them, we would create an inferior food nutritionally. And of course, why would we adapt to an inferior food? That we haven't been cooking for long enough either to make such a big difference. Jenny says some people claim we have evolved to eat cooked food. Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. If we evolved to eat cooked food, because I mean that would be like saying we evolved to survive on less than ideal food. But if we could eat fruit instead, we would still be better off, right? I mean, if cooking food allows us to eat something that will help us survive but not being ideal, adapting to that will essentially mean that, I mean, it's such a complex thing to explain, but essentially we would still be better off eating fruit. I mean, fruit would be better in every regard. If you chew raw cauliflower enough until it turns to juice in your mouth, I think it's great. Caroline says that. I've never tried that. I tend to not really like raw cauliflower that much. We had some cauliflower at one point. Remember that one dinner we had?
Yeah,
we ate
too much cauliflower.
We ate way too much cauliflower in one sitting.
Jenny K asks, would you guys pick beans over grains? That depends on the grain or bean, I think.
Yeah. Grains and beans both have similar issues in terms of anti-nutrients, but if anything, beans are probably the more nutritious of the two.
Yeah.
I would say. So I would probably choose beans. Jenny Marie says right now I'm prioritizing high carb over higher fat raw meals. So cooked food is happening. Yeah, it's basically what we're doing too. All right, so thanks for all your comments, guys, and just comment amongst yourself, obviously, and if we miss any of what you're saying, just post it again, and we because we can't really catch everything all the time. But next level up, we're dealing with higher temperatures like pressure cooking, maybe around 120 degrees Celsius, but the point here is that the cooking time is greatly reduced. So,
and it's also dry heat versus wet heat,
I guess,
also makes a difference.
The problems, though, maybe let them in on the biggest issues with cooking.
Yeah, when you, depending on when you're going above, I think it's 120 or 30 degrees Celsius. There are certain toxins that are starting to happen, especially, for example, for us vegans. What's it called? Acrylamides is created, and this is what is created when there's a thing called the Maillard reaction, which turns starch into it creates acrylamides, and
acrylamides is basically a toxic byproduct of carbohydrate cooking at high temperatures.
It's basically, how the more dark bread is, like if you have a loaf of bread and it's really dark on the outside, I'm not sure that necessarily that's acrylamides, but there is a lot more acrylamides the darker the process has become. So if it's totally black, if it's burnt, it's really bad, and it's extremely carcinogenic.
Yeah, it's shown to be one of the most carcinogenic meaning cancer-causing substances, actually.
Yeah.
Of course, what?
This happens, by the way, to carbohydrates only.
Yeah.
So depending on the carbohydrate structure and amount of carbohydrates is in the food, the more of it will be. And it also there's more acrylamides created the longer the process, the heating process have gone on, and the higher the temperature.
So baking, for example, in the oven is a bad idea
when like it comes French fries.
Yeah, not a good idea to do baking, really. Frying, that sort of thing. Better to do steaming or pressure cooking. Caroline says, so steaming or pressure cooking, which one is preferable? And the answer is that, just like you say, Caroline, cooking time is shorter with the pressure cooker, but the temperature is higher, so isn't it still a trade-off? I haven't looked into that enough to be able to provide a perfect answer to that. Diane says she used to cook with pressure cookers. Once the valve at the top broke, sprayed all over the kitchen. Damn. Yeah.
That's why I'm so afraid of those things.
There's no need to be afraid if you have a good one, I think. If you have a solid one that's not old, or I don't know what was up with yours, Diane. But anyway, I don't know. I can't really answer that question. But I'm guessing steaming and pressure cooking is fairly similar. But when it comes to lectins, these anti-nutrients, there's actually evidence to support that you get a greater reduction in lectin and phytic acid content by pressure cooking. So that might make beans and rice and stuff like that, let's just say beans, which has a lot of phytic acid and lectins, more easily eaten by people that are sensitive to those things. We're actually going to do an experiment. We're going to get a pressure cooker and going to see, because I typically react quite strongly to beans, and I think it is the lectins, and we're going to see what happens when I cook it in a pressure cooker. So yeah, anyway, pressure cookers can make foods taste sweeter. Well, that's interesting. Oh yeah, it's a powerful force. Yeah. So that's
the carbohydrates. It should be said that meat and animal products in general, when what's the word?
Cooked.
Yeah, when cooked at very high temperatures, that's the worst carcinogenics that can be created.
Yeah, there are some really, really nasty, horrible chemicals created when you cook meat.
Yeah,
it's like, it is the worst. Like, seriously, if you're gonna eat meat, you gotta eat it raw. Which is almost true with anything. If you ideally, we should be eating everything raw. But of course, we should be eating meat at all, because we're not carnivores. It's just very far away from being a carnivore, humans. But do you know the name of some of those substances?
No.
Oh, there are some really cool words.
Are you thinking of carnate and stuff?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think that's the word, though. But anyway, cooking meat, a lot of toxic stuff.
Yeah. Same goes for fats. Fats, I believe they become rancid.
Yeah, heated fats. A lot of bad stuff created there.
So you can imagine French fries at McDonald's, deep fried in super hot oil. It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. Like, seriously, you could say maybe you would be better off having a little bit of raw meat. Like, literally. Like, if you had to compare the two, I would guess French fries at McDonald's, deep fried stuff, is possibly the worst thing you could eat. Like, one of the worst. If you throw some fried chicken in there as well, and you really got the combo that's just utter horrible.
Free radicals.
Free radicals, yeah, that's true. Well, that's free radicals is like a group term. Basically, it means molecules that oxidize stuff in the body. the opposite thing, or our defense system to that, is antioxidants.
Yeah.
So heated fats, a big no-no, definitely. All right, so protein as well. Protein is denatured, and I guess at higher temperatures you get some of these nasty chemicals created from protein, especially animal protein.
So there's no reason really to ever eat anything that is not, like, if you can eat something raw, it's better to eat it raw if it doesn't have any downsides of being eaten raw.
Basically, if you say that, that's essentially what you're saying is, as long as it's edible, digestible, and non-toxic in its raw state, it's better to eat it raw. But then we're left with fruit and greens. And, that's the best way to determine if something is optimal or not, is just, can I eat a full meal of it in its raw, natural state? Is it enjoyable, tasty, and delicious to me?
And not giving me any side effects? No
side effects. That's when you've narrowed down the whole thing to just fruits, tender greens, and possibly insects. But eating, so there's a reason why you would cook something. Like, let's suppose there was like an Armageddon, like a apocalypse kind of thing, and we were here in Norway. This is a scenario we like to play around with. It's it's not realistic that this would happen, but if it did happen, we would have to survive here in Norway without any imported fruit or anything like that.
Yep.
We would obviously have to live heavily on potatoes and squashes and probably grains too. And
we could probably make it work without grains if we're...
Maybe, but the point is, in that situation, we would have to use cooking to our advantage, and it would be an advantage because it would open up the possibility of eating other foods. So let's just say, what's the only benefit of cooking is simply that it widens your arsenal of available foodstuffs. I mean, it gives you access to foods to which you're not normally allowed or able to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be good if you're surviving, but it can also be good if you're eating a very monotonous diet. Like right now, here in Norway, we're not able to source a lot of high quality fruit, and we're eating some cooked foods, of course, and actually, nutritionally speaking, it could be beneficial. Like, for example, because bear in mind, any food you eat has nutrients in it. I mean, even the French fries, but that's a bad example, but like even meat and stuff like that has valuable nutrients for humans. Milk, milk has lots of good nutrients that we need. The problem is that it has all these other things that we don't need.
Yeah.
And my point here is that if you're just eating bananas like we are, here in Norway, bananas is our main fruit, and they're not the best bananas in the world either. So nutritionally speaking, it's possible that they're falling short just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And eating something like cooked sweet potatoes then can actually make up for the lack of some of those nutrients that are lacking in the banana maybe over time.
Yeah.
So it actually gives you I hate to say this word, but gives you a more balanced diet. Like it includes, you're able to include more different foods and sort of cover your bases across the board more easily than if you're just eating one food or two foods. That doesn't still mean that that's better than a diet of raw fruits, where you have lots of different fruits in your diet, but it still means that it's probably better than just eating one or two fruits. Like some people just eat a raw food diet and they live on bananas and dates.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't do that long term.
This, of course, someone would, or many would argue that why don't you just eat... There's lots of fruit at the supermarket. Why don't you just eat totally raw? Eat grapes for breakfast, bananas for lunch, and peaches for dinner, and some avocado. The problem here is that we are living in Norway.
Whoa.
And this goes for pretty much almost every Western country I've been to, except a few specific, especially tropical and or subtropical places that have really high quality fruit. Here in Norway, the problem is if we eat peaches for dinner, we can have a really good batch of, and we've talked about this at length other times, but we can have a good batch one day, and let's say we need 1,000 calories for dinner. We can have those peaches and they will deliver. But the next day, we buy another box of peaches from the same place and the same vendor. But those peaches are absolutely terrible and only provide us with half of those calories we need. And then we end up, A, having a really kind of disgusting meal, in my opinion. 2, not getting the calories we need. 3, getting really bloated and feeling super stuffed because we have to stuff ourselves with more volume to make up for the calories. And 4, probably have to eat dried fruit or something like that afterwards to catch up on calories. And I think this is one of the main reasons a lot of people on the raw fruit diet is actually losing weight all over the place and not succeeding in many ways.
Yeah, it's simply the consistency factor. And bear in mind, this we can only talk from where our experiences.
Yeah.
Like, New York, Diane, it might be possible in New York. I don't know. Like the quality of fruit there, maybe you're able to actually find good stuff.
Yeah.
London, some places might have actually such a wide variety of imported fruit that it's actually possible.
Consistent.
But going to the store here in Norway, I mean, we've tried it. This is our personal experience. We're just talking for ourselves. We've tried it over the last few years a lot. We know that the grapes, forget about them. No need to even eat grapes once, ever, ever, ever. Like, the grapes are just, forget about them. They do not deliver, except once in a while. But it's like a lottery, If we bought the grapes every day of the whole year, we would definitely get some epic grape meals. But they would probably just be like 1 in 50, and that's not sustainable. You can't live like that. Whereas, even though the quality varies on the bananas and the sweet potatoes, at least that's very consistent in terms of calories.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why one would choose to eat cooked foods.
Another point is that we're tropical beings and we need tropical fruit ideally, and we can't really get that much tropical fruit here in Norway. I mean, they have papayas, but they're like insanely expensive, $10 a kilo style. And the mangoes are inedible most of the time. And then there's bananas. Bananas are tropical and they're healthy. The problem with a lot of other stuff, like for example grapes, poor grapes being talked down to, they are probably lacking in some nutrients that we might need.
Yeah, a lot of the fruits. Here's the thing, just because something is a fruit and just because something is raw and just because something is vegan doesn't mean that it's optimal for humans and nutritionally speaking. Like apples, like even if you take equal calories, like 1,000 calories of apples versus 1,000 calories of potatoes, although the potatoes lack certain nutrients, sure, the potatoes are better overall, usually, than apples. The point there is that, but if you look at something like 1,000 calories of mangoes or 1,000 calories of papayas or anything like tropical like that, it's just shocking how amazingly sufficient it is.
Yeah.
So my point here is that basically, don't just think that because it's a fruit, it's good enough. Like, I'm a raw vegan, I eat a fruit-based diet, so I can live on grapes and plums and apples and pears. Well, although sure, if you find good quality of those fruits, go ahead and eat them. They can be great, and they do offer great nutrition as well. But they're not sufficient overall. Like, they will have certain, there will be a lack of certain nutrients. And if you don't have access to anything else, cooking certain foods that are richer in those nutrients that are lacking can be a way to make up for it, because of course you can end up deficient, of course, and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's basically, unless you have like the most epic fruit, yes, like 1,000 calories of jackfruit, Jenny, then you basically need to look at the nutritional profile of the foods you're eating and do a little bit of sort of guesswork and look at the science and be like, okay, you take all factors into consideration and try to compose a diet that fits your nutritional needs. Using an ideal diet, supposed theoretically speaking, ideal diet of tropical fruits, probably a little bit of greens maybe, and maybe even insects, and then seeing, okay, what kind of nutrition would that give me? But that's an all other topic. We can get into that another time. But I guess my point here is just saying that even though raw tropical fruits, even though raw foods are always better than cooked foods, if we're talking about those foods that to which we're at. Okay, I'm going to rewind and say that again. Raw foods isn't always better than cooked foods, okay? Cooked potatoes versus raw poison ivy, you're gonna die if you eat poison ivy, right? Raw kidney beans, you're gonna die. So it's not just like raw food is always better than cooked foods. The foods that we're ideally adapted to, let's say tropical fruits, which is the main thing, they will always be better for us in their raw state. And they're also better than the alternative foods in their cooked state, like potatoes. But some fruits in their raw state, like apples, are probably outmatched by cooked alternatives like potatoes when you set them up against each other in terms of meeting human nutritional needs well. So it's not just like black and white. You have to look at the nutritional profile, and again, unless you're having access to that epic tropical fruit, you probably have to do a little bit of mixing and matching in order to meet your needs. Diane says, for the past 2 years in New York City, I've only found good grapes a few weeks out of the year. Luckily, these are one of the easiest fruits to test at the store. Yeah, that's true. You could always grab a grape. Cooked vegetables are also better than poor quality fruit of any type. Yeah, that is true.
Taste-wise?
Yeah, I don't know what she means, but I mean, taste-wise, I think they're better, and nutritionally speaking, usually they're better as well.
There's actually, in my opinion, very few things that are as disgusting as low-quality fruit.
Yeah.
It just has nothing going for it. I mean, at least cooked food has I don't know, it's something about it. But low-quality fruit, like really bad quality peaches, I just spit it out. I can't even eat it.
It's impossible to eat. So disgusting. Yeah, that's a good point.
I was gonna say something though. Yeah, so how much cooked food versus raw? Personally, I mean, we've for a long time been eating cooked food for dinner and nothing else, and fruit during the day, and that seems to work fine nutritionally. We've been eating bananas for breakfast and lunch, and then a big cooked meal for dinner with sweet potatoes and broccoli and stuff like that. Nutritionally, this seems to be pretty good, but might be lacking in some areas. You've been experiencing that when you've been eating cooked food for dinner, for breakfast and lunch. You've been having really weird energy issues.
Well, that's when I've been eating rice.
Okay.
Rice and grains, which has lectins. So
you never tried sweet potatoes for breakfast, for example?
Yeah, I did had pumpkin for breakfast once, and that was okay. Let's attend to the chat. Yeah, poor quality fruit is often acidic, and I feel horrible eating it. Diane says, and that is true. Matt agrees that your instinct tells you not to eat it. That is definitely true. Trust your instincts. I mean, you are a frugivore, right? We are frugivores. Our mouth, our nose, it tells us what to eat and not to eat. And if everything is raw, if you put all kinds of foods on the table, including meat and dairy and everything, we're probably the only thing we're gonna enjoy eating is probably mostly tropical fruits. Yeah. So if it's not delicious, it ain't nutritious. And
cotton candy grapes, Jenny M. Insane. We've had 2 times we've been trying cotton candy grapes.
Yeah.
One time it was insane, and the other time it wasn't any good at all. But that taste, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
There's something weird about them.
Yeah. Concord grapes, yeah, they can be pretty good too. What was I gonna say? cooked versus raw in terms of how, if you are including cooked foods, I think it is best to do it at night because there's a certain cultural need that we have as humans as well for that dinner meal, and we're very used to eating, sitting down for dinner and cooked food. If you are having cooked foods, I mean, why not just do it for dinner and it'll be better that way. Plus, fruit is more easily digestible typically. So less than, starch takes a little bit more digestion. Yeah. So eating sugar, basically fruit during the day, will be easier to digest, and you'll have more energy to do other things. Whereas in the evening, you're probably resting anyway.
Same after exercise and stuff. If you've been exercising in the beginning of the day, you should get some fast-working sugars into your body.
Definitely, to replenish those glycogen stores, you want to have sugar that just goes quickly into the cells. So definitely better to do the cooked food in the evening if you are eating cooked foods. And in terms of ratios, I mean, the less the better. The less you eat cooked food and eat perfectly ripe tropical fruits instead, the better it is. But how big of a sacrifice is it though? Let's share our experience over the last few years experimenting with eating cooked foods. How does it affect us in terms of how we feel? How big a sacrifice is it to eat 20-30% of your calories from cooked food? Well, I have to say that I feel almost no difference, including some conservatively cooked roots and tubers, like especially sweet potato, from how I feel when I'm eating all fruit. Like it's almost the same. But there is this tiny little difference though. We talk about it sometimes, how there's something about when you eat all fruit raw, there's a certain zing, or I don't know the word, but you have there's a certain vibe, electricity kind of thing in the body that just isn't there when you're eating some cooked food. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's your nervous system being bogged down by having to digest starch and that sort of thing.
Maybe. Another point you want to be careful about is salt. If you're eating food that someone else has prepared, or if you're eating canned stuff, which I definitely would avoid because of BPA, by the way. If you're eating these things, what was I going to say? I get distracted. Yeah. Salt. The problem with salt is, especially when you're eating out or someone else has prepared it for you, they can have a lot of salt in that meal, and your body adapts to sodium to a certain degree. If you're eating 500 milligrams of sodium a day or 1500, it seems to be okay, but you need to be eating it consistently, because what happens is your body adapts to and creates aldosterone, I think. There are hormones that regulate your fluid balance and that sort of thing, so you have to keep it consistent. But I guess the point is, if you're eating, don't eat other people's cooked food. If you want to be healthy, you pretty much can't go to restaurants, except if you're asking for boiled potatoes. Which we've done.
Yeah, we've done that. But so it's if you are cooking, it's best to do it yourself. But just to sort of wrap up what I was saying about how it affects us and how what our experiences is, I said that how I don't feel much difference from eating cooked sweet potatoes, but I typically have felt quite a lot of problems from eating grains and legumes though. I've done a fair bit of experimentation on that, especially last year, eating legumes and grains. And I tend to sometimes the symptoms are subtle, sometimes they're extreme, but I have certain issues with that, and I think it's due to the lectins. It seems you don't have those issues. So
I have very little issues with
you can eat almost anything and there's not that big a difference.
I
think if I'm going to say something, and it's probably it is pretty controversial within the raw food movement, I would say that...
Hold on, is it better for another topic? Okay.
If the value of the raw food diet, the value of the fruit-based diet, the reason why you feel so amazing when you eat fruit, has more to do with eating a high carbohydrate diet and a sort of low-fat diet with easily digestible food and getting all the nutrients and all those valuable nutrients and stuff from the fruit, has more to do with that than raw versus cooked. Because even a completely cooked, high carbohydrate, low fat diet will still give excellent results in terms of health. It's just that it's just not. You take it to the next level when you're eating an all raw tropical fruit based diet. Like, that's just the next level. But it's not like it's a huge difference there. Like, jumping from the standard American diet, standard Western diet, you can jump up to high carb. You can jump a little bit up to a vegan diet, standard vegan diet, but then you make the jump to a high carb, low fat, whole food, plant-based diet, as they call it, you make a huge jump and you're up here in the upper level of health. And then if you want to take that next level and go up to an all raw tropical fruit high carb diet, that's just the next level. But it's not like a huge difference. So personally, I don't feel like cooked foods is so bad. It's just not as good as a raw fruit diet, but it's still fairly good at meeting our needs and that sort of thing.
Caroline says that there's lots of raw cafes in LA that are transitioning from high fat to low fat. That's really cool. Yeah, most raw eateries are usually really high fat, and it can be pretty damn good. But I mean, we've had the worst digestion. I mean, we've had the worst problems digestion-wise ever on eating high-fat raw foods.
Yeah, like
way worse than pizza with meat. Like,
yeah, I've never been so sick almost as I was Christmas a few years ago. We made like raw Christmas food, basically nuts, and more nuts, and some seeds, and some more nuts, and a little bit of avocado, and some nuts. It was just nuts. And we had no restriction. We just ate this huge, like, nut loaf, raw nut loaf, and pâtés, and all kinds of things. And I threw up, and I felt, oh man, I was so sick. And it was like, never again. Well, never even come close to that with potatoes. Or, I mean, it's just like fruit. You can't really overeat on potatoes. It's just, in fact, satisfying. And
last Christmas, with like the last 7 Christmases, we've had different crazy meals for Christmas dinner. Going from the point is, we've been having raw and or high fat raw dinners for Christmas Eve every year, except last year.
2 years now we've done cooked dinners.
Yeah, but high fat the first one.
High fat cooked?
I mean, I just remember that last year in particular, we kept it low fat and pretty low salt. Then we ate lots of food, and afterwards I was just like, oh my god, I don't feel terrible. I was waiting for that oh my god, I'm gonna die feeling, but it just didn't come.
Yeah,
because it was just potatoes.
Yeah, and back in the day when we were also eating standard diet, and Christmas was like meat and all kinds of stuff, I remember also feeling terrible after eating a Christmas dinner. I mean, this is typical. People that eat Thanksgiving turkey and all that, and Christmas dinners in general, just so high in fat and lots of meat and stuff. So I used to have to lie on the floor, but now that's just not the case anymore. Even though we do cook foods on Christmas Eve because we try to make a traditional kind of thing, we feel fine. Matt says I have to try decreasing nuts and increasing seeds. Yeah, so just to chime in on everything you're saying there, it is true, like Caroline says, of course, that seeds tend to be a little bit lower in fat than nuts. Generally, they're a little bit easier to digest. Seeds, sorry. Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, don't you agree, like, experientially, that eating sunflower seeds or tahini and stuff, that's much easier to digest than eating nuts. But they're both in the same categories still, though. Like, if you really want to have a truly low-fat meal, you got to stick to the starches and the vegetables and the fruits, and be very careful with avocados and nuts and seeds.
But of course, these things might be fine to eat as well in moderation.
In moderation, that's the thing. Like with fruit, you don't have to moderate. The body moderates itself. Like you just eat as much as you feel like, and when you don't feel like eating more, you stop. That's how the body regulates and moderates food intake.
Yeah.
But when you're eating foods to which we're not adapted to eating, like nuts and seeds, at least not except maybe possibly a very small amount, you have to moderate it yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we should wrap it up. What I did out there was just turn on the water to boil, because we're going to steam our sweet potatoes. So that's fitting conclusion today.
But you guys probably know that already if you've been watching our live streams for a while. We always make dinner at this time.
Yeah. Caroline asks, what about the seeds in our fruit? And that's an interesting thing. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the tropical fruits, for example, papaya seeds are disgusting. I mean, I don't know, some people claim that they like it, but I think it's just because
I like having one, like every papaya I might eat one.
Yeah, okay, I wouldn't eat one
I
even.
know, but I
you know, people like the idea that papaya seeds can help cleanse out parasites, but that's because they're so toxic. They are toxic, actually, literally. So that's not something I would eat. And then durian seeds are way too big, and what else? Mango seeds are way too big, and a lot of those cherimoya seeds, you spit them out. A lot of these tropical fruits, they actually have seeds, jackfruit, that are things you would throw away. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you would eat them. And in the smaller things like grapes and apples and stuff,
they're usually either disgusting or tasteless. Like, there are very few nuts and seeds that are actually tasty when you think about it. I know rambutan. They are kind of like almonds, the seeds inside, and you can eat them, but they don't really taste much at all.
Yeah, and seeds, they generally have a lot of anti-nutrients because they don't. The fruit doesn't want you to eat the seeds, because the seeds, you eat the fruit and spread the seed. That's the deal you have with the tree, kind of. So I don't think we're seed eaters, and I don't think it offers any. Well, you know, it might offer nutrients that are not available. Let's suppose that's a completely different story, and I'll get in that in another video or something. But let's suppose we are supposed to eat termites, ideally speaking. They would offer some nutrients for us. Well, if we can't access termites, or we don't want to eat termites, maybe we could eat seeds in small amounts to get some of the nutrients, some of the fatty acids or whatever that you would get from termites. You know, it's possible. So again, it's just like with the cooked food versus raw. It's possible to use certain foods as strategies to get certain nutrients that are missing if you're not able to eat an optimal diet because you're not in the tropics or anything like that. So,
and I agree, Diane, watermelon seeds are kind of interesting. I sometimes eat them. I mean, I had a period where I was eating all of them, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, swallowing them, kind of. Just
yeah,
swallowing.
but even chewing.
Chewing all of them.
Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah. And that's it for today. Banana seeds, yeah, they're good.
Unless they're developed.
Yeah.
Then they're rock hard and it'll break your teeth.
Yeah. All right, well, I think this was a cool hangout. I'm tired now. We're going to chill out and eat dinner. And I'm so happy that all you guys could join us. Yeah. This was really cool. Nice turnout. And you have all these great ideas to contribute. And that's super cool. And of course, thank you so much for being part of our Patreon thing. It's so much fun to have you guys with us. So much fun to have this little community going.
Yeah.
And now that we've done all our, little upgrades to Patreon, making a couple new pledges with the coaching support, it's even more exciting, the whole Patreon thing. So, all right. Thank you for watching, and hope you're having a great evening.
Yep. Thank you. And see you around.